Good, thanks for being here. Nice to meet you all. My presentation is a little bit maybe different from other IP showcase presentations because most IP showcase presentations tend to focus on specific technologies and very technology focused. And I'm an expert in the expert hub for 2110 networks at Qvest Media, and I'm dealing with a lot of different projects because I basically get handed from all the 2110 projects, around all the 2110 projects. And if you see a lot of projects, you see that some of the projects go bad and some do better. And most of the time, then you attribute it to like a specific vendor or a specific technology. This doesn't really work very well. But then I came across two projects that one was doing very well and one was doing not so good. And they used very similar technology stacks. And then I thought maybe there's something more to technology, like if a project, especially a 2110 project, goes well or not. And I thought it might be good to do a presentation about what else is there except for technology that makes the project go well or not so well. And last year I did a presentation on Blackburst and PTP, and I related it to the Beauty and the Beast. And I thought that was fun, and so this year I tried to come up with a different story around it, and I found the fairy tale Rumpelstiltskin, which is from the collection of the Grimm brothers. Originally it's in German, but I found a translation somewhere in the internet. I'm using that one to guide you along the things that can go wrong in a project. And the tale goes like this. Do I have something like a clicker or something? Okay, thanks.
There's like 4 seconds of delay, just be patient.
Okay. Okay. Good. Now, yeah. And it goes like this. There was once a miller who was poor, but he had one beautiful daughter. It happened one day that he came to speak with a king. And to give himself consequence, he told him that he had a daughter that could spin gold out of straw. The king said to the miller, "That is an art that pleases me well. If thy daughter is as clever as you say, bring her to my castle tomorrow so that I can put her to the proof." So what is this exchange? It reminded me of a sales cycle or a sales pitch. Yeah? And the interesting thing that first comes to mind is the miller's daughter. She's not part of the conversation. She's not even she has nothing to say in this, although she is the subject of the conversation. The other thing that is obvious, not now, but later when you read the full tale, the miller disappears. He's never mentioned again in the whole story. But that's only the most obvious things. If you look a little bit deeper, then you find that there is a difference in status between the miller and the king, obviously. I mean, the miller is poor, of low status, and the king is of high status. And because of that, the miller, he wants to build consequence. And for that, he tells what first seems like a blatant lie. The king, who is of high status, he accepts what is, for us, considering a blatant lie, literally. And the question is, why does he do this? Because it's pretty obvious, even, I mean, if you believe in things like magic, the miller probably has some access to straw somehow. Why is he poor if his daughter can spin straw out of gold? And gold out of straw. And that is a thing that's obvious, but probably it's only a misunderstanding, because if you take a very specific straw and put it through a very specific process, and then you can soften the fibers, and in the end you get linen. And linen you can sell them, and it gives extra income to the miller, and it seems to him like it's gold, because I mean, for a poor miller selling something extra, that's pretty much so. The first thing is in the sales phase, you build a solid foundation for your project, and you do that by first building trust, not consequence. If you're trying to impress people, then it's already bound for failure at some point, because in the end you will need to have to deliver on the process. But this goes both ways. Also, the customer should not be like the king, because you should aim for communication at eye level. Once someone told me, if the customer is the king, he will treat it like kings in all ages. He is courted where he recognizes it, and it's betrayed where he doesn't recognize it. So you better not be the king. Aim for communication at eye level, and trust. And then, if you notice something is wrong, like the king should have noted it, and we will later see that he didn't really believe the miller, but he did not call it out. He said, yeah, he will just give it a try. I have nothing to lose. But in your project, you have something to lose. Even if you have like a contract and they say, whoever I'm contracting, he needs to fix it. It will take time. It will cost money. It will just spoil the project. So if there's something wrong and you notice it, then call it out. The next is understand what you're getting. So we see here that there was a misunderstanding just about what it is. I mean, the miller meant something completely different probably than the king was expecting. And that's why all these IP presentations that go, IP showcase presentations about technology, why they're so important. Because you learn what you're getting, but also what different flavors of IP technology are there and how things can be done differently. You can do it with a monolithic spine in the network. You can do it with a spine leaf topology. You can do it with SDN and so on and so forth. There are many flavors, and it can easily happen that in the sales project, in the sales phase, you're talking different angles and you don't really come to the same conclusion, although you think you are. And that's something you need to keep an eye on. And if something seems not right to do, if something seems too good to be true, then it probably isn't. Either it's not too good or it's not true. And the second thing is, if you have concerns or something not understood, you have to voice it. You have to really make sure that both sides understand what it is about. It might seem obvious, but I've seen projects where it wasn't the case, and then in the end, that can spoil a project. But back to the story. When the girl was brought to the king, he led her into a room that was quite full of straw and gave her a wheel and a spindle and said, now set to work, and by early morning, if by early morning thou hast not spun this straw to gold, thou shalt die. And he shut the door himself and left her alone. And so the poor miller's daughter was left there sitting and could not think what to do for her life. She had no notion how to set to work to spin gold from straw, and her distress grew so great that she began to weep. Then all at once the door opened, and in came a little man who said, "Good evening, miller's daughter. Why are you crying?" "Oh," answered the girl, I have got to spin gold out of straw, and I don't understand the business." Then the little man said, "What will you give me if I spin it for you?" "My necklace," said the girl. The little man took the necklace, seated himself before the wheel, and whir, 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 3 times round, and the bobbin was full. Then he took up another, and whir, 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 3 times round, and that one was full. And so he went on till the morning, when all the straw had been spun, and all the bobbins were full of gold. At sunrise came the king, and when he saw the gold, he was astonished, and very much rejoiced, for he was very ambitious. So he was astonished. So he didn't think this was true, but he still threatened the life of the daughter and tried to make her do what he thought was impossible. And later he said, "Oh, it's possible? Very well." So that proves the point. You should voice your concerns, because otherwise, bad things happen, as we will see. Then he leaves the daughter, goes out, closes the door, locks it, and leaves her alone. In your project, you should always stay engaged. I mean, maybe this worked for SDI projects where everyone knew how they would be working, but in 2110 or in IP-based networks, it's all about flexibility. So there are many things, first, that you learn during a project, and then that you need to decide during a project. So stay engaged all the time. Projects that don't run well, most often the customer goes away and says, yeah, you're finished, and then we'll see us at acceptance, and then we accept the whole thing, and then it's fine. But it simply doesn't work that way. And in other projects, I've encountered customers that really want to do the thing themselves, because it's not only about seeing, but also about doing. And then sometimes people say, no, you don't, let me do it. Like the customer itself, although it's like our work to do, he said, we want to do it themselves because they want to know, learn to know how things are done and really do that themselves. And if we can help, I mean, we're always there. We can help, we can teach people, but if they do it themselves, then they learn so much more. So, and sometimes they say, no, we don't have time. Then we do it for themselves. That's also okay, but you need to stay in touch and engage. The next thing is, like, obviously we're not threatened with death in most projects, but sometimes if you set your stakes too high, then the pressure becomes so high that people find of ways like hiring somebody who comes just in to spin the straw of gold. Gold from straw. So first of all, things can go sideways with too much pressure, and the other thing, it hurts the trust that you're having. I mean, there's always some pressure in the project, which is totally fine, but if it becomes too much, then people don't trust each other, they cannot tell about mistakes, and that leads to bad things in the end. And then, I mean, it would have been enough to prove it just to have like a bunch of straw and see if she can spin it to gold. But it was a full room of straw, which she needed to do. And that's also something. I mean, for spinning straw to gold, probably it doesn't make a big difference. If you have just a little bit or a lot of it, it just takes more time. But for projects, it's quite different. If you have a big project where you have lots of things, then and you try to set up everything in the beginning and say, that's how we build it. It will take a long time, and on the way you discover things and you want to change something. So it's better to start with a small scope and later and see how far we get, like more in an agile way, so that you then can learn things and then expand on the learnings that you had. And it also keeps the pressure low, it also keeps the stakes low. So we had, I mean, there's always those projects where you build a complete facility and then you try to fix everything for the tender phase, and yeah, then you have a long project, and during the timeline you need to change around things, and at the end you have a big acceptance, and that's not really how 2110 projects work best. I have another example of a customer who just set up the network, and you think, wow, what can you do with a network? And he just took in external 2110 streams from an external party that was supplying streams for a football match, and just sent them to a gateway, and then they came out and got to their traditional SDI infrastructure. And that's a very simple use case, but they put that really for a high-profile football match. They used it, and they really did it, and all the operations people were involved, and that also means that during the trainings they were much more focused, because they know next weekend there is this football match, and then the system is going. But it's easy. There's no switching. There's nothing. It's just pure transportation. It builds confidence. The system is going. We were on call during the whole football matches. I was a series of 6. We didn't get a single call because it was just an easy use case. But it built confidence. The people know the system. That people know that it works, at least at this level, and then you can build up the next level, put control layers on top, and so on and so forth. But that I found a really good example of how you can start small and then build gradually up. And now the system is up to this level. We'll add a playout system or whatever have you, because the playout system will have its own problems, definitely, because playout systems always are complicated. There's a lot of workflows in there. And then if you know, we have seen the network and the infrastructure in production already, then that gives you a layer that where you say, okay, that's at least that's fine. But of course, you have to manage the complexity carefully, because you can also, if you start too early, start building things on top of each other, then it can get very complex. So, to the next part. I think if I read all this and we're running out of time, I'll skip a little bit ahead. In the following nights, the miller's daughter has to spin straw from 2 more rooms. So she has done the first task, and the king sees, oh, it's going very well, and now she has to do 2 more rooms. With the 3rd room, the king doesn't threaten her life, but he promises to make her his queen, to marry her if she successfully completes the tasks. And again, the little man comes. For the 2nd room, he gets the daughter's ring, but that's everything she has. And with the 3rd room, he wants to get her, as she says, no, I have nothing more to give. He says, I want your first child when you become a queen, which seems kind of unethical. But he says, I want. She promises him all the riches of the kingdom before, because when she becomes queen, and says, no, I don't want any riches. I want something living. That's better than any riches. The straw is spun, the wedding is held, and I mean, if the king only would have stopped after the 1st room, everything would be fine. Everything would be happy. He would have gold, and nothing. No one would be hurt. I mean, the necklace, okay, but. That would be fine, yeah. But instead, the king extends the scope of the project, and that's what we call scope creep, yeah. And that's also something to be aware of. First, consolidate what you have got. As I said, I mean, you first do one thing to the end, like doing an acceptance, and then you start building on top of that. And the next thing is, here we see what trust, not having too much trust, leads to. Because, I mean, at some point, especially when her life is not threatened, the daughter could have come up with, I have made a mistake, there was something else, I didn't do it, and so on. But here also, the stakes were too high. I mean, becoming a queen, well, the proposition of becoming a queen was too much of a pressure for her. It's another kind of pressure. It's not your life, but it's also, and that can also lead to things going sideways. And I don't want to say that everything needs to be very rigid. Rather, on the contrary, you need to be flexible. But you and as I said before, start small and enlarge things later. But you need to build things first before you build on top of them. Build them to the end and really have them accepted and in production. And now the king, it's suddenly it's like before it was just something between the daughter and the little man, but now it's becoming more serious for the king, because I mean the queen is, or the daughter is promising his child. So he is very affected now. Okay, and then what happens next? In a year's time, the daughter brought a fine child into the world and thought no more of the little man. But one day he suddenly came into the room and said, "Now give me what you promised me." The queen was terrified greatly and offered the little man all the riches of the kingdom if he would only leave the child. But the little man said, "No, I would rather have something living than all the treasures of the world." Then the queen began to lament and to weep, so the little man had pity upon her. "I will give you 3 days," said he, "and if at the end of that time you cannot tell my name, you must give up the child to me." Okay, what does the queen do? I mean, she obviously has a problem, and she tries to shift the problem to somebody else, like the little man. You shouldn't do that because, again, I mean, solve your problems later. I mean, it's okay in a project where you have a trustful relationship to give back and forth some things, but if it's a one-way thing like here, I mean, what does the little man get? he just is good willing to extend what they have been agreed to. And generally in projects, if it's a one-sided thing where somebody is offering goodwill gestures, it will not last very long. In the first night, the queen tries to come up with names on her own. In the second night, she sends out messages to inquire for names, but they are not the right names. The little man always answers, "No, that's not my name." The third day, the messenger came back again and said, "I have not been able to find one single new name. But as I passed through the woods, I came to a high hill, and near it was a little house, and before the house burned a fire, and around the fire danced a comical little man, and he hopped on one leg and cried, 'Today do I bake, tomorrow I brew. The day after that the queen's child comes in. And oh, I am glad that nobody knew that the name I am called is Rumpelstiltskin.'" You cannot think how pleased the queen was to hear that name, and soon afterwards, when the little man walked in and said, "Now, Mrs. Queen, what is my name?" she said at first, "Are you called Jack?" "No," answered he. "Are you called Harry?" "No," answered he. And then she said, "Then perhaps your name is Rumpelstiltskin." "The devil told you that! The devil told you that!" cried the little man, and in his anger he stamped with his right foot so hard that he went into the ground above his knee. Then he seized his left foot with both hands in such a fury that he split in two, and there was an end of him. Now that's a drastic and sad ending. I mean, I knew that everyone would be over 18, so it's probably okay. I learned this ending very early as a kid, and it stuck in my mind. Later, I discovered that the Grimm brothers had two less drastic endings. The first one, from their handwriting, was that the little man flies out the window on a cooking spoon, and the second was he angrily runs into the woods and is never seen again. I mean, it really doesn't matter. He's gone, and he can't spin any straw to gold anymore. And yeah, that's also something to keep in mind. If you do things like I've told you in the presentation that are bad for the people, that are stressful, then they might not be there. And I've seen in late 2110 projects, I've seen quite a lot of churn where people are leaving companies or projects or whatever, and that's bad. I mean, it's bad for the project, it's bad for the company, whatever. It's never a single issue why somebody leaves a project or a company, but you have to keep that in mind. I've talked to a friend of mine who is an employment lawyer, and he said that the new metric for failed project is not how many money you lose, but how many people you lose, because that's, I mean, we all see that people with very specific skills are in high demand, and you should not lose them. So if you treat those that actually do the work badly, then they will leave you. And that's also something to keep in mind when you think about how you conduct your projects. And it's not about the money. The little man could have had all the riches in the kingdom, but he said something living. Okay, now it's the child, and it seemed to be unethical, but it's a symbol for that it's not about the money, not about possessions. It's like about trust, about just being, I don't want to say kind, but just make a good work environment in your projects, because then the outcome will be good. And that's all for me.